Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me clear? Okay, thank you. It's my great honor to be here with Bob, the co-author of the book. But I think most importantly, I really want to, share my appreciation to HKUST and BEC for organizing and supporting this event. Of course, we started to plan about what we should do after the book has been published. And we came up with a lot of ideas, including touring around the world, including Hong Kong and some Chinese cities, and also in the US. But I think most importantly is for us to share with you, what we learned in our journey, our respective journey, my journey and Bob's journey, in our own position in the past with research institution, and in that process, working together with different stakeholders, including the business sector, and also with the public sector, with government agencies, into trying to shape better public policy for the well-being of people. And the book, we in the book, we try to include our experiences and try to synthesize what are the key ingredients for successful policy making. Not so much just from the government's perspective, but outside the government, how research institutes, how the academia, how the business sector can also play a part. So what we are trying to do in the next 40 minutes, and we will split between my presentation and Bob's presentation. Actually, it will be one presentation, but with two parts. But we're going to focus on maybe a couple of examples, one from Hong Kong and one from LA, just to emphasize and to share with you, what we've learned, as I said, in that journey. And we feel that maybe, that's something for, the audience to take note of, and maybe you can bring that to your own world, in your position, to try to think about how you can also play a part in that process. But the book, that's just been published by the MIT Press in May this year. But for the Hong Kong launch, actually, this is the first event in our book tour. So this is actually the launch of the book right now. And we have to thank a number of organizations. Obviously, the funders, Wing Foundation from Hong Kong and the Henry Luce Foundation from the US. They supported, respectively, the work from Civic Exchange and also the work from UPI in the US. And of course, I mentioned Civic Exchange and UPI because of our long-standing association, my association with Civic Exchange and Bob's association with UPI. Now, the book idea started from a number of meetings and exchanges between the two research institutes. And we instantly not fell in love, but we felt that we are working on the same page. We are taking a similar approach to try and participate in policy making from a different perspective, from outside the government. And we instantly feel that we should do something together and try to maybe document what we've done in the past. And this is exactly why we've written, and now we have published the book. And we want to thank, of course, the MIT Press for taking up this project with us and publish the book. And without their professional help, this is not going to happen. Now, the book is, we try to cover as much as we can, but obviously we've left out something because it's already a very thick book. And I don't think, we can go on to include, all the issues that we feel is important for these cities. But in the book, we covered 6 major topics: goods movements, air, water, food system, transportation, and the planning and use of spaces in these cities. Now, but other than these topics, which is obvious when you look at the table of contents and it's easy to recognize, but underneath all these topics, we've learned there are these processes in which and with which we advances public policy from different positions. And we learn we have to do different things before we can actually help to shape public policy. And with that, I mean, sometimes you started with a research inquiry, a scientific inquiry. You are just fascinated and interested to know more about something, an issue like air pollution. What are the causes? Why are we having such a bad state of air pollution? And what are the solutions? You have to start with understanding the science behind the problem. And that's what we did in most of our work in the past 20 to 30 years. And even with the knowledge even by filling these, what we call the science gap or the knowledge gap, we still can't work it on our own. We need to work in partnership with different people, with different stakeholders. And that's the second important part of our process, our model, where we call it action research. And through action research, we try to reach out to the stakeholders and eventually to reach out to the policymakers and try to, well, not to force, but actually to influence some changes, maybe to start a dialogue with the key stakeholders. And then hopefully by managing the dialogue, we can come to something fruitful at the end of the day. So that's what we have done through different examples and case studies in the past, both in LA and Hong Kong. And in my presentation afterwards, I'm going to also share with you, how we're going to bring this idea to mainland China and to start telling them that this is a way to work with the government and other key stakeholders in important policy areas in which we feel that's the right way to go. And this is going to bring you success in the long run. Now, so of course, the last part of the equation would be policy intervention that would improve whatever issues we are dealing with, like air pollution, water problem, food problem, so on and so forth. But I think these are all important components. Research is really important. Engagement with the stakeholders, including the business sector, are really important. And the theme of today's event is merging science, business, and policy. And I think this is exactly what I'm trying to share with you in my first presentation. Now, I'm sure some of you have heard about the Fairwinds Charter. This is an industry-led initiative with which the shipping sector actually volunteered to use low sulfur fuel while the vessels are in Hong Kong at berth, at the berthing location, like the container terminals. And I'm going to very quickly go through the process and to highlight the key moments with which we came up with this idea and eventually driving policy development and change in Hong Kong and also in China. Now, again, this is similar to what I showed you, the action research framework. In this particular case, we started with scientific inquiries. We started with a few questions. Hong Kong being one of the biggest seaport in the world, how come the contributions, according to the government, a contribution to air pollution was so low? In I think 2005, government's numbers showing that the contribution of the shipping sector to air pollution in Hong Kong is only as low as like 2 to 3%, which is unbelievably low. Okay, so as scientists, we believe there must be something wrong. Maybe that's deal with the methodology or the assumptions or both. Okay, so that's the beginning of the inquiry. And we have friends living in the outlying islands and traveling by ferries every day, back and forth between the home and the offices in Central. And along the way, they took pictures, tons of pictures of all these polluting vessels in the harbor. And that adds to our inquiry. With all this evidence, we just wouldn't believe the contribution of air pollution from the shipping sector was that low. And that prompted us to really go into the research. But with the research, we also have to work. We have to bring the knowledge to the stakeholders so that they, in their position, can start the conversation and then think about solutions and help the government to change policy. So that's what we've done. And Fairwinds Charter came in that particular juncture after a series of stakeholders engagement and meetings. We came up with something voluntary from the industry, and that pushed the government to also think about public regulations. That happened in 2015. The ship's been using the cheapest fuel, that's the bunker fuel, but with a very high sulfur content, usually more than 4.5%. That's what been required by the International Maritime Organization 10 years ago. So that's really filthy and dirty, and after combustion, it releases a lot of pollutants, including SO2 and also trace metal, and it's bad to health. And we have got studies 10 to 15 years ago already demonstrating that there's a huge connection between mortality and emissions coming from ships. And you can see the major hotspots of that impact would be near the major seaports around the world, including Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, I'm sure you know the geography of Hong Kong. We have a container terminal and other facilities close to population center. We're talking about probably 2 kilometers away, people living from the container terminal facilities. So the connection between pollution and people and their well-being is really close, and is a very big concern for us. And in terms of regulation, there are international regulations under the IMO regulatory framework, but there's no regulation in Asia at all or at the city or country level. So all the control, all the experience that we've learned, mainly from LA and Long Beach at the beginning, and also from Europe, they have regulations requiring vessels to burn cleaner fuel while they are operating in their waters, but not in any Asian cities at that time. So I'm talking about 2005, 2006, that period of time. So we started with some very preliminary research with our collaborators and also with our interns. So we've got interns researching into what's happening elsewhere when it comes to ship emissions and ship emission control. So they learn a lot from LA, as I said, and Long Beach, their cleaner action plan, their voluntary action, working with the industry, with the shipping sector, but also working with community groups to try to raise their awareness, to use their concerns, their voices, to push the government to do more. And I'm sure Bob will tell us a lot more about what's happening in LA, maybe not on shipping emission issues, but on food issues and other important issues as well. So we've done the research, we've known the background, and we feel we are in a position to advance the research. So in 2008, the government commissioned a study on ship emission inventory for Hong Kong, and that's been awarded to UST, and I had the privilege to be at UST taking up the project, working with some colleagues also in this room from UST, and we completed the study a few years later with a very fine resolution emission inventory for ships. And it shows us a lot of information that is extremely useful in terms of designing the best control measures within Hong Kong. So we know most of the emissions are coming from container vessels. They are contributing almost 80% of all the pollutants. So that's number one. That's number one evidence. The second evidence is most of the emissions are produced when the ships are at berth in Hong Kong. So it contributed 40% of the emissions. Okay, so with these two information plus the map, which shows the emission hotspot in Kwai Chung, which is once again confirmed that container terminal area is the most polluted places in Hong Kong when it comes to ship emissions. So with all this evidence, we feel that the next action is to engage the trade. And who should we talk to? First of all, the container terminal operators, the regulation, so they can't say that they haven't got the experience and they know the field very well. Okay, it's only because there's no regulation in Asia and especially in Hong Kong, and that's why they are using the least expensive fuel. And we understand their position, and they also say, are you sure it is ship emissions contributing most to the problem in Hong Kong? And we show them the figures, and we show them the numbers, and we show them the methodology as well. So after all these interactions, they kind of agree, okay, now we are part of the problem. And they now wanted to be part of that solution. And then we started to tell them, okay, now look, the map shows that is the berthing location is the container terminals. That's causing all the problem because most of the ships will stop there for over 13 hours. But they kept their main engine on burning bunker fuel. So can we do something to change that practice? And of course, they are already switching fuel in LA and Long Beach with a regulation. So we suggested, can we do the same in Hong Kong? Now, at the beginning, some of the lines were saying, oh, why should we start that process? Because, of course, they know it's going to hurt the cost. I mean, they have to pay more for the fuel. But then we did some calculation to show that actually, you're not spending a lot of time in the port area. You're spending most of your time at sea, and you're still burning bunker fuel at sea. But when you switch to low sulfur fuel in the port area, then you are going to reduce emission to the extent that public health will be improved. And that will be a huge benefit to everyone, including your own crew and staff members working in Hong Kong. And so with all these back and forth arguments, but then at to a certain extent, also agreements and compromises, they eventually agree that this is something sensible to do. So what happened is they come up with the Fair Winds Charter. They agree to switch to low sulfur fuel at a higher cost, but they pay from their own pocket with the recognition that this is going to clean up air pollution, at least apart from the shipping sector to a large extent. They want to use it as, as a good reason to engage the government, because they always mention that, okay, we can start with voluntary action. We can have a few major shipping lines starting the process, but the voluntary action cannot last forever. They want regulation at the end of the day, and they always say that they want a level playing field within the industry. So, some of the champions, they jumped out and say, we'll do that, but they want to start that process with which it will lead to regulation in Hong Kong. So every single lines operating in Hong Kong with their vessels, they have to switch. That's the ultimate goal for the Fair Winds Charter. And it's not just about Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong is just the first step. Eventually, they want the same kind of regulations and fuel requirements in the whole Pearl River Delta region, because they are operating in the region. So you can see, we are working with the shipping sector, the business, trying to understand their concerns, but also their vision. And we want to work closely with them in realizing that vision. Now, they want a level playing field. We feel that that's the right thing to do, because we know voluntary action is not going to last for long. And, with changing circumstances, people will drop out eventually. So we need regulation to make sure that everyone will comply. So this is, kind of aligned with Civic Exchange vision as well. So we work along that line, and we bring the government people in. So with the Fair Winds Charter starting in 2011, and that's been extended all the way through 2014, we started to work with the government, and we arrange meetings. Civic Exchange play a role as a facilitator. We organize meetings, private meetings and public events, so that the entire shipping sector and the other ancillary sectors, like the truck sectors, the fuel suppliers, the cargo owners, they all came in and joined the meeting and the discussion and shared their thoughts about, what we should do together and the pace and the timetable. So we came up with, the Fair Winds Charter with, a lot of ideas, not just for that particular year, but actually for the years to follow. We want the government to start talking to Guangdong, to the authorities, and also to the shipping lines and the terminals, to think along the same line. Can we have something voluntary at the beginning and in Shenzhen and also in Guangzhou, but then eventually leading to regulation and uniform regulation in the whole region. Now, the government came into the table, and we started, as I said, a lot of meaningful conversation, and they came up with this incentive scheme for those who switch. So at the beginning, the government wasn't in the table. They were not involved. They only were observers. They know what's going on, but they didn't want to get involved at the very beginning because they're unsure about whether the business sector actually support the idea of the Fair Winds Charter and the regulation. But now with the Fair Winds Charter, they know the industry is ready. At least the leaders within that group is ready and willing to push within their own associations. And, with the incentive scheme and then the Clean Air Plan that's been published in 2013, so just think about the timeline. We have Fair Winds Charter in 2011, the incentive scheme in September 2012, and then the Clean Air Plan in, March 2013. So it's a sequence of events that's demonstrating the government is taking not just ship emissions, but air pollution in general much more on board than the previous government, I would say. Okay, so they have got the blueprint, they know what they want to do, and in this Clean Air Plan, they talk a lot about ship emissions and how to collaborate with the shipping sector and also with Guangdong. Now, this is what we've got at the end of the whole process: regulation, the air pollution control, ocean-going vessels at berth regulation, and now become law. So all the ocean-going vessels coming into Hong Kong, when they are berthing, they have to switch to 0.5% sulfur fuel. And the government has estimated the benefit. There will be a 12% reduction of SO2 and 6% of PM10 in the whole of Hong Kong. Now, when it comes to air quality in the proximity of the container terminal areas, actually there's huge improvement in terms of air quality. And friends from UST, they've done a lot of research in the last couple of years to demonstrate that change and improvement. And I'm sure they will share with you the information afterwards. Now, this is, I think, my last slide before inviting Bob on stage. I think what we learned is, what are the key things that's important for this process to be successful. We need a platform, and a very open platform. The platform is not for us, for the researcher or the academics to tell the business sector what to do. It's more like a platform for us to interact and share information. So, as I said, we share our research findings with the business sector, with the shipping industry. But industry also share with us the latest development in terms of technologies and in terms of regulations around the world. So it's like a channel for us to, really learn a lot, about ship emissions in general, not just in Hong Kong, but also globally. And what's going on, what are the smartest, control measures at that time that we could consider. And we need some leaders to lead, to champion the whole causes. And I have to commend Maersk Line, OCL, and APL in particular. These three lines, they started the whole process. They actually jumped the gun. Before the Fair Winds Charter, they already started to use low sulfur fuel back in 2010. And with their leadership, the other lines also joined forces to become what we call the Fair Winds Charter. We need scientific evidence, of course, so that's a part for the academia to do good research. But research that's showing, sharing finding, that's important to bring on board the necessary action that's going to make a difference. And we also need the industry to respond. So the business is also playing a very important role in that process, because if they are, unresponsive, or if they are just too concerned about the cost, the bottom line, then it wouldn't have happened. So I think, we really have a very open conversation over the last 8 years. And so eventually, with the common vision, we came along nicely with, the actions and the results that we are hoping for. Now, that's only the first part, because we only got regulation in Hong Kong. Now, I think we are in the process to try to encourage the government authorities in Guangdong, as well as in the whole of China, to do something similar. And I can tell you the Ministry of Transport actually, back in 2016, they started what we call the Domestic Emission Control Area Plan. And that's, related to ship emissions, but in the major port areas along the Chinese coastline. And they are doing something similar. They are requiring the ships to gradually switch to clean fuel, very similar to what we have been asking the ships to do in Hong Kong. So I think, we started something working with the business. We wouldn't have been successful without the support of the business. But on the other hand, the business wouldn't move that far without the scientific knowledge that we've generated as researcher. But I think at the end of the day, is the citizens, it's the people that benefits from what we've done. And that's, kind of epitomizes what we've done, just like Bob in the LA. As a think tank in Hong Kong, we try to push forward good policy, but with good evidence and support and engagement. So with that, I will now invite Bob to come up and share his experience in LA. I think he's going to talk a little bit about the food system, but also the Sustainable Cities Network as well. So please welcome Bob.